There is always going to be the challenge of having a leadership race while a parliament would face confidence votes.
Oops.
That was a big mistake. As the dust settled after Justin Trudeau's press conference, we, as well as others, began dissecting what Justin Trudeau said and, just as importantly, what he didn't say. He began by stating he was proroguing Parliament because of the House being seized and the filibuster, but near the end of the press conference, while taking questions, he said something very different. Groups are now considering taking legal action to stop proroguing Parliament. What would a challenge potentially entail, and is there a precedent?
Let's take a look. But before we do that, we wanted to go over exactly what prorogation is and what it does.
So for that, we're going to go to my favorite book, the Green Book. We're going to be looking at pages 392 and 393, but you can also find this information online at ourcommons.ca. We'll make sure that we put a link in the description. Prorogation of Parliament, a prerogative act of the Crown taken on the advice of the Prime Minister, results in the termination of a session. It is possible to prorogue a session of Parliament by proclamation when the House is sitting or during an adjournment. Both the House of Commons and the Senate then stand prorogued until the opening of the next session. Parliament meets for a new session in the normal manner on the date set out in the proclamation. Parliament is prorogued either by the Governor-General or Deputy of the Governor-General in the Senate chamber or by proclamation published in the Canada Gazette. When Parliament stands prorogued to a certain day, a subsequent proclamation or proclamations may be issued to advance or defer the date. In the new session, the government is required to table a document outlining the reasons for the prorogation. Effects of prorogation. Prorogation of a session brings an end to all proceedings before Parliament. With certain exceptions, unfinished business quote-unquote dies on the order paper and must be started anew in a subsequent session. Bills which have not received royal assent before prorogation are, quote, entirely terminated, end quote, and in order to be proceeded with in the new session, must be introduced as if they had never existed. On occasion, however, bills are reinstated at the start of a new session at the same stage they had reached at the end of the previous session. This is accomplished either with unanimous consent of the House or through the adoption of a motion to that effect after notice and debate. The House has also adopted provisional amendments to the standing orders to carry over legislation to the next session following prorogation. Since 2003, prorogation has had almost no practical effect on private members' business.
So what does all of that mean? Well, it effectively means that all government bills, that includes Bill C-63 and C-65, are essentially dead.
And an easy way to know if it's a government bill is it will have a bill number that is 199 or less.
Right. Now, it does talk about some different ways to revive those bills. One of the fastest ways is to get unanimous consent in the House. That means every single person in Parliament would have to agree to that. Good luck having that happen. The other way is for a motion to be brought forward, but then you have to then go into debate and debate whether or not to actually bring these bills back. So given that, this has actually only happened, I think, 2 or 3 times in terms of bills being brought back through debate. And there's been a couple times where bills have been brought back with unanimous consent because they had a very nonpartisan nature behind them.
Or they were very essential to the country's functioning.
Right. So given that just about all of the legislation currently in Parliament is essentially separated by partisan interests, we don't expect any of this to happen. So that is not something that we're even worrying about. Never mind the fact that when Parliament comes back on March 24th, let's just say the craziest thing happens and the government doesn't fall, they only have weeks left of sitting in Parliament to actually get anything accomplished, because then the whole session ends in June, and then you would go to an election in October.
I think, though, our odds of getting hit by lightning are probably better than the House continuing after the throne speech in March. So I think we're safe.
Yeah, and Tony and I were talking about this yesterday in terms of the behavior of the NDP and Jagmeet. Although, you would, never trust Jagmeet to, sell ice cream. Even when he had it in his hand, he'd probably call it an apple or a potato. But the one thing that he hasn't done up until the last couple of weeks is he's never actually answered clearly whether or not he would vote confidence in the government or not.
Yeah, he hasn't committed. And yesterday in the press conference that he called, he not only committed to voting non-confidence in the next, at the next possible opportunity. One of the reporters also asked him if he will vote non-confidence after the throne speech, and the answer was yes. So again, is it possible that he could be lying to us and that he could continue to prop up the government? Sure, anything's possible at this point, but I would not say that it's likely.
Right. And this is the third time in a row that he has been very direct in answering this type of questions. So does that mean we trust Jagmeet? Absolutely
no,
not.
I don't trust the man as far as I can throw him.
But I think the likelihood is that they're going to cause this government to fall, because just from a strategic perspective, there's nothing else that the NDP can get out of this government. Jagmeet will have his pension, so there's nothing left for the NDP to do it.
And it would be a disaster for them to prop up the government one more time after the throne speech. So this is why we feel it is extremely unlikely.
Now, let's get to the meat of this video. So let's just take a quick look at what Justin Trudeau said near the end of the press conference again yesterday.
The parliamentary press gallery, and anyone who's been watching politics closely over the past months will know that Parliament has been entirely seized by obstruction and filibustering and a total lack of productivity over the past few months. We are right now the longest serving minority government in history.
Well, to be fair, you guys weren't really functioning as a minority government now, were you?
Well, he said serving, not functioning. So
still, though, it's bending the truth.
Yeah. So this was his justification that he had stated earlier in the press conference of why he prorogued Parliament. Well, we can't get anything done. The House is seized, and I'm trying to reset the agenda.
Time for a reset. It's time for the temperature to come down, for the people to have a fresh start in Parliament, to be able to navigate through these complex times, both domestically and internationally. And the reset that we have is actually two parts. One is the prorogation, but the other part is recognizing that removing me from the equation as the leader who will fight the next election for the Liberal Party should also decrease the level of polarization that we're seeing right now in the House and in Canadian politics, and allow people to actually focus on serving Canadians.
Now, he should have stopped there.
Yeah.
And maybe he would have if all of his papers didn't blow off the podium at the beginning of the press conference. And it was like an act of God, seriously, because someone came up and put this stack of paper on there and they didn't move at all. And then they sat there for about 10 minutes. Justin Trudeau opens the door, starts to come out, and they all blow away.
It was glorious.
Anyway, he didn't stop there.
Given, as you just said, there's going to be confidence votes in March, opposition parties have said they are prepared to bring down your government. What kind of chances do you think you are leaving to your successor, given that there will only be mere weeks for them to introduce themselves to Canadians before heading into an election, potentially?
I have a tremendous amount of confidence in both Canadians and in parliamentarians' interest in serving Canadians in the right way. We're in a minority government right now, and there hasn't been an active leadership in a minority government in more than 50 years in this country. And there is always going to be the challenge of having a leadership race while a parliament would face confidence votes in the course of delivering supply to the government.
Right there.
Oops.
That was a big mistake. He essentially admitted to proroguing Parliament so that his government could not face a non-confidence vote and therefore an election while they were trying to sort their own stuff out within the party and pick a new leader.
Right. Now, let's talk about what he said before, right? If it was just about resetting the agenda and getting out of this filibuster, then he would have done what Stephen Harper did. And he actually did it twice. He prorogued Parliament twice to reset the agenda. But Parliament immediately returned.
Yeah, you can prorogue Parliament for as little as a day. You can say, okay, we're going to wipe the slate clean. We're going to use prorogation to do that. All the bills will stop except for the private members' bills. And then we're going to start everything again tomorrow.
Right. So what Harper did on a couple of occasions is in September, he said, okay, we're going to prorogue Parliament and then we're going to come back October 1st. Now, Parliament doesn't even sit until like a couple of weeks into September. So they actually didn't really lose much time at all. So that's what resetting the agenda is. Now, if Trudeau literally did exactly what Harper did and he prorogued today, then it would come back on January 27th as it was meant to, with the clean agenda, with everything kind of reset back to zero. And it would have had the same effect. So this business about, well, I'm just trying to reset the agenda and stop the filibuster, that doesn't really work because you're already on a significant break.
Right. You could have done that very quickly. As Ryan said, you could have prorogued yesterday, January 6th, and brought it back January 27th, which was the date that Parliament was scheduled to resume anyways. And you would have achieved the same effect. You would have wiped the slate clean, aside from private members' bills, but you would have wiped everything clean and you could have gone in and started again.
Now, I'm going to take you back earlier in the press conference to something Justin Trudeau said that is also going to get him into deep trouble. And it was when he was talking about a previous prorogation by none other than Stephen Harper. Take a look.
In 2008, the Governor General correctly concluded that because the very last times in the previous weeks that the confidence of the House had been tested, it had passed that confidence test, Stephen Harper continued to have the confidence of the House. And it actually would bear out because as soon as they came back from the prorogation, Stephen Harper won a confidence vote once again. So a political document or political speeches doesn't carry the kind of weight that winning a confidence vote means. But this prorogation will take us only into March.
Okay, so he's invoking Stephen Harper and saying, oh, the Governor General did the right thing in proroguing Parliament. Well, time out, everybody. Let me take you back to just a couple years ago.
The Liberal Party platform in 2015 said it wouldn't use prorogation as a political tactic. There are several committees investigating you right now, and those efforts will be shut down as a result of your move today. How can you have said that in 2015 and do this now?
Stephen Harper and the Conservatives prorogued Parliament in order to shut it down and avoid a confidence vote. We are proroguing Parliament to bring it back on exactly the same week it was supposed to come back anyway and force a confidence vote. We are taking a moment to recognize that the throne speech we delivered 8 months ago had no mention of COVID-19, had no conception of the reality we find ourselves in right now. We need to reset the approach of this government for a recovery, to build back better. And those are big, important decisions. And we need to present that to Parliament and gain the confidence of Parliament to move forward on this ambitious plan. The prorogation we are doing right now is about gaining or testing the confidence of the House, which is the opposite of what the Conservatives did that we rightly railed against back in 2015.
Huh.
So it was wrong then, but it's right now?
Let me just double check. Hold on.
In 2008, the Governor General correctly concluded that because the very last times in the previous weeks that the confidence of the House had been tested, it had passed that confidence test, Stephen Harper continued to have the confidence of the House. And it actually would bear out because as soon as they came back from the prorogation, Stephen Harper won a confidence vote once again. Stephen Harper and the Conservatives prorogued Parliament in order to shut it down and avoid a confidence vote. In 2008, the Governor General correctly prorogued Parliament in order to shut it down and avoid a confidence vote. And avoid a confidence vote.
And avoid a confidence vote.
We are proroguing Parliament to bring it back on exactly the same week. It was supposed to come back anyway. But this prorogation will take us only into March, only into March, only into March. We are proroguing Parliament to bring it back on exactly the same week. On exactly the same week. It was supposed to come back anyway. Only into March. The opposite of what the Conservatives did that we rightly railed against back in 2015. In 2008, the Governor General correctly concluded.
Wow. You know,
It's wrong when he says it's wrong when he's trying to be oppositional, and it's right when it's working in his favor because he's doing the exact same thing.
well, and he doesn't seem to understand that video exists.
Well, and not only that, but the prorogation of 2008 was to avoid a constitutional crisis. I've stressed that in many of our previous videos. I won't go into the full story now, but I shouldn't say that it was the exact same thing. It was very different that had Parliament not been prorogued, I believe it would have caused a constitutional crisis in 2008. That's not where we are right now.
Right.
That's not what's happening right now.
So this is the problem with Justin Trudeau. He's invoked Stephen Harper because he's saying, well, Stephen Harper, he prorogued Parliament to avoid a confidence vote. He doesn't talk about the constitutional crisis. He just talks about the confidence vote. So he's saying, so therefore I am right in proroguing Parliament. He doesn't say that I'm doing it to avoid a confidence vote. He'll say, well, there's going to be a confidence vote when we come back in March. That's not the point. It's not the point at all. You're saying it's to reset the agenda. You're saying it's just to get away from the filibuster. If you could do that, why aren't you doing it the way you were, fluffing up your peacock tail in your previous press conference when you're saying, we're bringing it back on the same day.
Right.
We're not doing anything. This is very different. So you should be able to bring this back on the same date, just like you did before, because before you said you were just resetting the agenda. This should be the exact same thing.
But it's not. And the reason it's not is because they want to try to run their leadership race.
Right. So that is the reason. And we all know that's the reason, especially when Justin Trudeau tells us that's the reason in the middle of that press conference. So what has this resulted in? Well, there's been some groups out there like Democracy Watch that have been watching what's been unfolding. And they made a statement about what would happen next. So this is from a National Post article. Is prorogation a political tactic? There has been considerable discussion of the use of prorogation as a political tactic. Last week, Duff Conacher, head of citizens group Democracy Watch, told the National Post that he would instigate a court challenge in the federal court if Trudeau and Parliament prorogued. Quote, Democracy Watch will consider filing a court challenge if the Prime Minister asks the Governor-General to prorogue Parliament at a time where it is clear that the prorogation is a self-interested move to protect the interests of the Liberal Party by preventing a majority of MPs from voting non-confidence in the government. End quote. And is what happening here.
Well, and that's because the Prime Minister unilaterally decides or advises the Governor General on prorogation, and you want to make sure that the Prime Minister is not abusing that. For example, if you had a Prime Minister who said, well, I need to go overseas and visit my family for a few months, let's just prorogue Parliament while I'm there. See you guys later.
Right.
Like, obviously you can't do that, right? So there are unwritten mechanisms in place to prevent the abuse of prorogation.
So what these groups are saying, like Democracy Watch, is this is likely to be an abuse of that power. Now, what does that mean? That means that they may instigate a challenge in court. Okay, what does that look like? Well, a lot of people have been talking about the most recent precedent of this. There actually is none in Canada, but the most recent one is in our mother Westminster system country, and that is the United Kingdom. Now, this was a case where Boris Johnson prorogued Parliament while this whole Brexit exit was happening. And he was accused of doing that to prevent debate in the House while this was all happening. So that was actually brought to court, challenged, and they won. And what ended up happening was prorogation ceased immediately, and the House actually returned to continue the session. So we went hunting to find some of the resources on this, and we actually ended up finding the actual judgment from the United Kingdom Supreme Court. So this is the title page from that paper. The full link is in the description as usual. So you can see who the Supreme Court justices were and who was actually on this. And the judgment was on September 24th of 2019. So what was the judgment essentially? Way down in the document, in paragraph 50, this is what it says. For the purposes of the present case, therefore, the relevant limit upon the power to prorogue can be expressed in this way, that a decision to prorogue Parliament or to advise the monarch to prorogue Parliament will be unlawful if the prorogation has the effect of frustrating or preventing, without reasonable justification, the ability of Parliament to carry out its constitutional functions as a legislature and as the body responsible for the supervision of the executive. In such a situation, the court will intervene if the effect is sufficiently serious to justify such an exceptional course. So a lot of people are looking at that and saying, well, there was a crisis affecting the entire country. That was Brexit. Was this being used for political means? Was this being used for personal means? Was this being used for, the benefit of a party? The argument was, yes, it was being used for the benefit of a party. And was this being, used to prevent parliamentarians from actually doing their job, in a way violating their privilege? So all of this kind of rolled in together to produce this judgment. So how does this compare with Justin Trudeau's situation? Well, we broke that down. So here's a little grid comparing Boris Johnson in 2019 and Justin Trudeau in 2025 and their relevant cases. So you can see that there are similarities between the two of them. Boris Johnson's is, we need a new legislative agenda post-Brexit. The UK Supreme Court found this to be a pretext to avoid parliamentary scrutiny. Justin Trudeau, we want to unseize Parliament. However, in his press conference, he referenced facilitating a leadership race, raising questions about the true intent behind that. So both of them are saying, here's our legitimate reason. And in both of them, there's actually an underlying cause that is problematic. And if you look through the rest of this, there is some interesting similarities to this. But, that raises, the next question.
So the situation sounds similar, but can we use a UK law as a precedent? And this is the question that we're asking ourselves because we really don't know. Canada is part of the Commonwealth, but we are our own unique, distinct country with our own unique, distinct constitution. And we've been able to amend our constitution since 1982. So can we use a legal outcome in Britain and kind of import that into Canada and say, well, yes, there is precedent?
And that is unknown, right?
We're not
Because-
lawyers, so we don't know the answer to this, unfortunately. But I think it's a very important question that hopefully we'll have the answer to soon.
Right. And there's been some sort of feeling that the Canadian courts try to stay out of the workings of Parliament, but I don't know if that's going to fly in this case, because if it was just this, right? If it was just this going on, I don't know if there would be an argument or not, or a strong enough argument. But the fact that you have the President of the United States that's coming into power on January 20th, threatening 25% tariffs that could have a catastrophic impact on our economy, and the government is essentially prorogued for 2 months after that is supposed to have happened, there's an argument that there could be an impending crisis facing Canada, and this would not be a justification. So we'll see. But until then, we're going to be watching to see what unfolds, and we will be bringing you updates as they come to us.